Good day, students. Welcome to the lecture on survey research. This is a lecture which you should be able to understand very well, because this is what you have just conducted in Kliptown. And this is just the theory that underlies what we basically did when we collected the data with some extras like telephone interviewing, etc., etc. Okay, so at the end of this theme, you should be able to design a questionnaire for survey research, and you should be able to conduct survey research. There once was a demographic survey done to determine if money was connected to happiness, and Ireland was the only place where this did not turn to be out to be true. Okay, so this is a joke from Fiona Shaw, and so the Irish are happy whether they have money or not. The percent 45 is the percent of smartphone users who check their email before they get dressed. Okay, I must admit I'm in that category, so I plead guilty. So you see that with survey research we can make statistical inferences because we have a lot of data, and we can then say 45% of the participants in our survey say that they answer their email on their smartphones before they get dressed. Right, so the data collection approach is we start out with our investigative questions. In other words, what is the main question that we want to ask? And remember that in this study that we've just done, the main question was, what is the impact that KYP has on the Kliptown community? Then we decided that we were going to firstly develop the questionnaire by doing a focus group, and we were then going to go door to door to do interviews to collect our data. Our measurement questions were then the questions that came out of the focus group, and those were the questionnaires that you then took from door to door on Saturday the 10th of May when you did the data collection. And these measurement questions that came out of the focus group were then taken into the instrument design. So we identify the screening inquiry, we prepare participation appeal, we identify sources of error, we prepare the error reduction program, reduction plan, and then we prepare the instrument. And as you could see in the preparation of the instruments, quite a lot of effort had to go into that, because firstly I took what came out of the focus group and I then prepared the instrument. The instrument was then sent inside my department, so if all the lecturers in the Department of Operations Management then commented on the instrument, I then also sent the instrument to the KYP management team, and they looked at the instrument, and I had a Skype session with them where they commented on the instrument. And then further, I sent the instrument to the KYP board of directors, to one of the people on the board of directors. He looked at the instrument and he commented on the instrument. And then at the end of the day, the instrument had to go to the ethics committee, and the ethics committee had to agree that the instrument was not harming the participants in any way. Right, and then if there's an interviewer involved, which is the case in this study, because you guys ended up being the interviewers, we then design interviewer training, and that is what I did before I made the video on training you how to do the interviews. We then trained you by you watching the video with the instrument in front of you. Then we contacted the participants chosen as an element sample. Alright, so remember that we had a data collection plan, and the data collection plan basically said who we were going to interview. And this was a question of cold canvassing. So we had certain characteristics that we looked at. The people had to be over 18, and they had to either have kids that were KYP members, or if they didn't have kids that were KYP members, they at least had to know about KYP. And you then presented the survey to the participants. This was not a self-administered survey. This was a survey where an interview took place, and the data was collected. So here you on the spot filled in the surveys, and then if there was no return of surveys, you would initiate the follow-up procedure. But in this case, we didn't have to do that because you collected the data on the spot. But say we went into Kliptown and all that you did was hand the surveys to the different households, we would then have had to go and collect those surveys, and if there was no return of survey, we would then have to contact the participants again. Alright, so that's basically the data collection approach that we followed. Okay, so now the next thing is that there are several ways in which we can communicate when we collect the data. Okay, so there is the observation approach. Now, observation is where you do not hand or discuss questions with your participants, but rather where you observe how they do something. So say, for example, on our KYP project, we say that we want to investigate how meals are handed out to the kids, say at lunchtime. Then what we would then do is we would draw up a list of what is it that we want to observe. So firstly, we want to observe, how is the organization, how are the kids organized before they get their meals? How are the meals made? Are the meals made in a hygienic way? What happens after the kids have had their meals? How is cleaning up done, etc., etc. So then you would have a whole list of things that you want to observe, and then you would go to Kliptown at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, and you would go and tick off the things that you observe, and you would make comments on what you observe. So you might observe that the volunteers don't wash their hands before they prepare the meal, and you would then write that down on your observation sheet. That isn't the case. I have observed them, and they are very strict in their hygiene processes, but that's just an example of something that you might observe. All right. So for observation, that is by definition something that you do one-on-one or face-to-face, because you have to go to where the thing that you want to observe is happening. So in other words, if you decide to use observation, you basically just go on to instrument design. If you, on the other hand, decide to use a communication approach, so this is where the participant has to communicate with you and has to give you feedback on something. You basically then have 3 approaches that you can select. The one is a self-administered survey, the next one is a phone interview, and then the last one is a personal interview. So we decided to go the personal interview route, but let's just talk about the self-administered survey. There you can decide to mail the survey to the participants. So we use good old SA Post Office, and most people don't use that these days because firstly, that type of survey is expensive because you have to pay mailing cost. Secondly, the post office service is not very good, So you're not sure whether your survey will reach the intended participant. And thirdly, the intended participant then has to mail back that survey to you, which makes it even more expensive because you then have to give a self-addressed envelope for the person to mail the survey back to you. Another way of doing a self-administered survey is by intercept, and this is if I was going to maybe stand in a shopping center and I want information, or I want perceptions of people on, say, the cleanliness of the shopping center, and I randomly stop people as they walk past and I hand them a survey and I say, would you mind just taking 10 minutes to fill this in? That would then be an intercept survey. Okay, then a computer survey. This is what we use a lot today. And you guys have taken part in a few computer surveys on this course already, because the first survey that you did was where you had to enter your information as a student for me, so that I had access to your email addresses, etc., etc. Another survey that you did was when I asked who has transport to Kliptown, so the arrangements regarding the transport. Another survey which I've sent out is the one about the sick test. So those are all computer-based surveys. Now, computer-based surveys can be just an email that you send to somebody where you ask them a question in the email and you ask them to respond via return email. Some people attach questionnaires in Microsoft Word or Excel format and ask people to answer the questionnaires. And what I did was I used SurveyMonkey, which is a tool that you can use to set up surveys and then to capture the data. And it's very, very powerful, and at the end of the day, it gives you all the information in Excel format. And you are going to have some experience with this, because I'm going to show you how to download information off SurveyMonkey and how to do some basic analysis in Excel. Right, then another way of doing it, and KYP has done this before, is you ask people to come to a central location and you then give them the survey and then they complete the survey. I'm hoping to do some research on to improve this course for future students, and so on the last day of class I will probably be handing out a survey for you to complete, so that I can get a better idea of how things went and how I should improve for future years. Right, then another communications approach is a phone interview. So the first one is human administered. So think about the questionnaire that you had for Kliptown. You could have just phoned somebody who lives in Kliptown and you could have asked them those questions over the phone. So essentially that is what a phone interview is about. You phone the person, you say, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And you ask them the questions and you then enter their answers. Then computer-aided telephone interviewing is where the person who is busy with the interview sits in front of a computer, and the computer then guides them which questions to ask, and they then enter the answers into the computer, and depending on the answer, the computer will then guide them to the next place where they have to jump to. So for example, if you are doing a computer-based or a computer assisted survey with the Kliptown survey, where you have asked, is your child a member of KYP? If the answer is yes, the computer will then automatically take you to the page which is only for KYP members, and if the answer there was no, the computer would automatically take you to the page which is for non-KYP members. So the computer then makes decisions based on the answers that you get. Okay, and then computer administered, we don't get a lot of those in South Africa, but I know that they're very popular in the United States. And so what happens is you pick up your phone and there is a computer on the other side that then asks you the questions, and then depending on your responses, then will take you from question to question and might skip questions, and so on and so forth. Alright, then the last communication approach is the personal interview. So we can either have it in an interviewer controlled environment. So if we had wanted to, we could have arranged minibus taxis to bring some of the community in Kliptown that we wanted to interview to TUT. We could then have put them into a room at TUT, and we were then in control of the environment where the interviews take place. And then if it's interview controlled, it can be pre-scheduled. So we could have asked KYP to identify community members for us beforehand, and we could then have asked them to put those people that they identified beforehand and told beforehand that they were coming here to TUT on a Saturday on the taxis, and that would have been then pre-scheduled. Or we could have asked KYP to, on the day, just select some community members and ask them, do you have a morning, and can you then come and do the survey? So that would have been intercept. Right, the other type of personal interview is where you have a participant-controlled environment, and obviously the interviews that we did in Kliptown were of this nature because we went into the environment of the participant. We could have pre-scheduled them. This we didn't do. We did intercept because you just went from house to house and you asked the people whether they would be prepared to answer some questions. But we could have pre-scheduled it, so we could have asked KYP to arrange interviews for us with specific members in the community. Alright, so all of these decisions that we make in deciding on the communication and data collection approach will then impact on the way that we design the instrument. Okay, because obviously a mail survey will be designed in a different way to an interview survey, because in a mail survey it's intensive for the participant to write, so you want to make sure that the participant is comfortable with writing, and you ask the questions in a way that that the participant can read it and can answer it, whereas in an interview controlled environment you can guide the interview and you can explain concepts, etc., etc. Okay, so the dilemmas for surveys in today's world is the ubiquity of cell phones and the rapid continuing development of the internet have completely altered the way we talk to each other, the way marketers talk to customers, the way customers shop, and the way media research their audience. And unfortunately, that has also meant that we get respondent fatigue because people are tired of being asked questions and being bombarded with questionnaires. And so that is why things where you cold canvas, in other words, you just send out questionnaires to random people expecting them to answer. Say if you call them on their cell phone or you send it to their email, people are likely to just ignore it or to hang up on you because they see it as an invasion of their privacy because it happens too much. Okay, so the strength of a survey is its versatility, it's efficient, and you can get geographic coverage with it. The weaknesses are that there are errors that can be induced, and what do you do with inaccessible populations? So if you, for example, decide to use a computer-based survey, What about people that don't have access to a computer? Or you use a cell phone survey. What about people that don't have access to a cell phone? Okay, so the sources of error are basically in your measurement questions. So if your questions are not clear and concise, and if your questions are open to interpretation, your questions can introduce bias. Because if somebody doesn't understand the question, they're going to answer from their understanding, and at the end of the day, you are then not getting the data that you are after. Then another source of error can be the interviewer. So if you are using interviewers, which is what we did in this study, the way that the interviewer poses the question can induce error. Because the interviewer can bias the person in the way in which they ask the question. And then another source of error can be the participant. So, for example, some of you complained that there was a language barrier when you went out to to gather the data. And so, if the participant didn't understand what you were saying and they didn't have the same understanding of the question as you, then that also would have introduced error. Okay, this is a very interesting slide, and it is also a very important slide because it tells us what motivates participants to take part in a survey. And it would be interesting if, when you guys do your reflection for your data collection assignment, that you think about these factors that lead to increased or decreased participant motivation, and you maybe discuss to what extent you think this was a factor in the data collection that you did. Okay, so the first thing is the press of competing activities. So I'm very, very busy, and if you send me a survey by mail and it doesn't look like an interesting topic to me, and it doesn't feel to me like I'm going to get anything out of that, I just simply ignore your survey. One of the groups told me on Saturday that the second interview they did, the person just slammed the door in their face, and we don't know why that is, but it could just have been that the person was busy with something else. Okay, then another thing which will decrease participant motivation is embarrassment at ignorance on interview topic. So if you come and do an interview with me about nuclear physics, I will probably tell you, sorry, I'm not available to do the interview because I don't know much about nuclear physics, and it's not something that's in my field of expertise, and I know that you're going to ask me questions that I don't know the answer to, so I'd rather just not talk to you. Dislike of the interview content or topic. I don't know to what extent some of you experienced this on Saturday. I know that some of the people told me that there was definitely polarization in that the people who have kids who are KYP members are very positive about KYP, and the people who don't have kids that are KYP members are very negative about KYP. All right? And so it might be that you came across some individuals that the minute you mentioned the word KYP told you to go away because they were not interested in taking part because they dislike KYP. Then the last thing is the fear of consequences of participation, and that is why in our questionnaire we asked participants whether they would be comfortable with us making their information available to KYP, because or their name available, because at the end of the day we wanted honest responses, and we didn't want people not responding because they feared that there would be retaliation from KYP if their name was made available. Right, and then the thing that increases participants' motivation is the prestige of the research sponsor or agency. So if you as individuals had gone into Kliptown without the backing of KYP, so without the volunteer that went with you, and also without the backing of TUT behind you, it might have been more difficult to get people to comment and to take part in the survey. But because you had KYP behind you, and because you were from TUT, which is a recognized university, people were more likely to give you the time of day and to actually complete the survey. The perceived importance of the topic, I think that from the feedback that I got from some of you, because of the strong views that people have around KYP, for them it was important. It was important to participate in this because they want somebody to hear their voice. They want somebody to know how they feel about KYP. Then liking or compassion for the interviewer. So you were moving through the townships, and some people might have felt sorry for you because you were students and you had to collect a certain amount of data, and so because of that they stopped and they gave you information. Then the self-image as a dutiful citizen. So I, for example, will always vote in an election because I feel that is my duty as a citizen, because it doesn't matter which way the election goes, at the end of the day, if I haven't voted, I haven't indicated what my preference is. And so this is the case sometimes when one does surveys, people feel compelled to take part because or the types of surveys that sometimes come through my inbox is from PhD students that are doing research into project management, and then I always felt compelled to help them because people helped me when I did my PhD, and also as a researcher I feel that I need to help fellow researchers, and so that's also part of being a dutiful citizen. Then loneliness, and I would be interested in your reflection on this. To what extent do you think that some of the people that you interviewed invited you into their homes because they were lonely and they wanted to talk to somebody? And then the last one is confirmation of self-importance. So in other words, I'm going to take part in your survey because I think that it's important that somebody listens to me and somebody hears what I'm saying, because my view is very important and my view counts. And that is why I would then take part in your survey. Right, so remember this participant motivation, and when you do your reflection, think about this and discuss this in your group and make some comments around whether you think any of the increases or decreases actually affected your data collection. Okay, then there's certain response terms that we use in research. So the first one is non-contact rate, and that is basically the rate of people that we wanted to contact but we were not able to contact. So say you are given a list of email addresses of project managers in South Africa, for example. Non-contact rates would then be to the extent, so you then send out an email to everybody on this email address and you ask them whether they would be prepared to participate in your survey. Non-contact rate is then all those emails that bounce back, because all the emails that bounce back are the people that you could not contact. Then the refusal rate, that is basically those people that slammed the doors in your face. So that would also be important that you report on your data collection assignment as to how many people actually refused to speak to you. And then the incidence rate is how many people actually did agree to take part in the survey. Okay, so we've already talked about this: self-administered surveys, telephone surveys, and then survey via personal interview are the communication approaches that we can choose. Right, so self-administered surveys are via mail drop off. So that would have been if I had taken the questionnaires to KYP or to Kliptown, and I'd gone from house to house and I dropped them off, and then I said to KYP, okay, I'm coming back on the 10th of May to just collect those surveys that have been filled in. Of course, we can use fax, we can use computer-assisted self-interviews, and this includes email surveys, web-based surveys, and intranet surveys are all included in computer-assisted self-interview. And so, in other words, a tool like SurveyMonkey, which I like to use, is a computer-assisted self-interview. Disk by mail, that would be if you send them a I suppose these days we wouldn't send a disk, we would send a stick. The survey is then on the stick, they then complete it and they mail the stick back to us. And then the last one is intercept, and that is where you just stand somewhere and you just intercept somebody, or you maybe go from house to house. The census, for example, is intercept. Although they know who all the people are, they still go from house to hand out the questionnaires. Oh, okay, maybe that's more drop off, because normally what they do is they drop off the questionnaire and then they can come back to collect it afterwards. Right, so the advantages of self-administered surveys is that they are relatively low in cost, because you don't have to spend the time and the effort of having a person interview every single household. The sample that you're going to use will be accessible. So in other words, you can only use this where your sample is accessible. If you have time constraints, self-administered works very well, because you go and you say, please fill this in by the following date, and then whatever you have by that date is what you use. Anonymity can be ensured, and people will feel comfortable with anonymity, because if you do not ask any questions that tracks the survey back to them personally, they are anonymous. And you can cover a wide range of topics in a self-administered survey. Okay, so when we design a questionnaire, we use what we call the total design method. And the total design method basically says that the questionnaire must be easy to read, it must offer clear directions, it must include personalization, it must notify people in advance of the fact that you are coming, and it must encourage response. And so this is another thing that you can reflect on in your assignment, and you can reflect on to what extent did we apply the total design method to the questionnaires that we administered in Kliptown. Okay, and then the options for web-based surveys is we can use fee-based services. So now SurveyMonkey, which I use, is a fee-based service because it costs me 2,500 Rand a year to have access to that. Or we can use surveying software where you have a one-off payment for the software. With fee-based services such as SurveyMonkey, they also give you that you can also even pay them for participants. So you can say that I want project managers that live in North America that have 5 years project management experience, and then they have a database of people that they will then send the survey to. The problem with that, of course, is that it's cold canvassing, and the people don't know you. And if, as a South African researcher, I'm doing research in North America, why would they be interested in taking part in my survey? So the advantages of surveying software is that you do your questionnaire design in a word processing environment. There are question and scale libraries. You get automated publishing on the web. You can have real-time viewing of incoming data, and this is really cool. If you guys go into SurveyMonkey in the next 2 weeks on a regular basis, you will see as your colleagues are populating the survey, you will see the data coming in. You can have rapid transmission of results, because as soon as there's enough results in, you can send it to whoever needs it. And you have flexible analysis and reporting mechanisms. So you will see if you go to analyze on SurveyMonkey, SurveyMonkey already does some analysis for you. And you can easily import the data from SurveyMonkey into Excel for further analysis. Okay, so the web as a survey research venue, the advantages are cost savings, short turnaround time, use of visual stimuli, access to participants, perception of anonymity, and then access to data and experiences otherwise unavailable. The disadvantages are recruitment, so to get people to actually take part, coverage, because remember, you are introducing bias in the sense that you are only getting responses from people that have access to the internet. It's difficult to develop probability samples. Remember when we spoke about sampling, we spoke about probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And probability sampling is where your sampling is completely random. Now, you've already introduced the bias that only people that are connected to the internet can take part, and then on top of that, the people will self-select to take part in your survey depending on their interest in your topic. Technical skills, so if somebody is uncomfortable with the internet, they're not going to be able to complete your survey. And then system compatibility issues. I have here and there experienced it that people have battled to open SurveyMonkey and could then not take part in the survey. And then the possible self-selection bias that we've discussed. The advantages of a self-administered study is that you can get access to inaccessible participants. So you can send a survey to somebody who lives in New Zealand, which might not be accessible to you as you live in South Africa. You can also then give us incentives for to get a higher response rate. It's the lowest cost that you can have for a survey. You can get geographic coverage because you can send your surveys all over the world. You need minimal staff to collect the data because one person can send emails to 1 million people, and you don't need individuals to go out and collect the data. People perceive it as anonymous because they are doing it by themselves and they are not giving you information about themselves. They also get time to reflect, because if you are in my face and you're busy interviewing me, I have to give you an immediate answer. Whereas if I am doing the survey by myself, which is what a self-administered survey study is, I can then think about my answer and I don't have to give an immediate response. You can have more complex questions, and of course that depends on the reading skill of the people that you are interviewing. It's the data collection is rapid because also remember, everybody is now completing the questionnaire in parallel. So you're not going from individual to individual to individual. People are at the same time filling in the questionnaire for you. And you can also use visuals. You can use pictures and so on, which then makes the questionnaire more visually appealing. And also you can use pictures to explain concepts. And multiple sampling is possible. Multiple sampling is where you sample more than once. So remember when we spoke about the Delphi, Delphi is a multiple sampling design because you have more than one round. So you send out the information more than once. Okay, the disadvantages of self-administered surveys is low response rates in some modes. So especially if you use mail, people are less likely to respond. There's no interviewer intervention. So if the person does not understand your questionnaire, there isn't an interviewer to clarify. It cannot be too long because people get fed up and they stop it. It can't be too complex. So if you tell them go to question 2C and then jump back to question 1B and then go to question 10A, people get lost and then they just give up. And you require an accurate list of people that can take part in order to make it a probabilistic sample. You can also find with self-administered surveys that you get skewed responses. So people that are very, very adamant about a certain topic will make sure that they give you either a highly negative or a highly positive result, and that can then skew your results. It can also be that you get participant anxiety because maybe they're afraid to read the questions by themselves because they're scared that they're not going to be able to understand them. It can be that they can't read, so that would give participant anxiety. Directions are necessary, so you have to give step-by-step directions of how to fill in the questionnaire. People need a low distraction environment to fill in the questionnaire. So in other words, if you're going to hand out self-administered surveys in a mall and it's very, very noisy and very, very busy, people might feel distracted and then they don't answer all the questions or they give up on the questions. And then also security. So whether how the data is handled, if it is secure, if they mail it to you, whether it will get to you, etc., etc. Okay, so we've done this. Okay, so the way that we improve response rates is you give advance notification so that you let the people know that you are coming. You send reminders. So this is now for self-administered surveys. So you send reminders where you tell them, please will you remember to send in the survey. You have to give return directions and devices. So if you mail out the survey, you have to tell them they must mail it back to you, or they must email it back to you, or however they must do it. You can give monetary incentives, although in academic research that is not really done. That is seen as introducing bias. You set participation deadlines, so you tell people by when you need them to participate. The fact that people are anonymous can also improve response rate. And you appeal for participation. So you tell them beforehand, you tell them during, and you thank them at the end. Right, so I'm going to stop the survey here, and I'm going to do it in two sections. The next section will then be the telephone survey.